I think with the sentencing reform, some of it will happen automatically just because the sentences are lower. But then it's going to be, you're right, it's about empowering legal aid and public defenders who don't have resources to do this. So I don't have a good answer. Part of it is just understanding when we advocate that our victories need to have another piece and that fighting for the money to be there makes a difference. Sometimes people say to me, Ethan, why don't you just fight for a few people who go to prison and forget about the funding for treatment? And I'm torn on that. John McCardle, what's the name of his organization? Choose Responsibility. The former president of Middlebury, he's trying to reduce the drinking age to 18. But he's very careful to link that up to notions of what it means to be drinking responsibly and using drugs responsibly. So it means taking that notion, taking the issue of reducing the drinking age, which appeals to 90-odd% of young people your age, and certainly in this part of the country, and the sorts of schools you're coming from. And linking that up with a campaign of many of us, safer and others, about why is marijuana being treated different than alcohol, given the relatively lesser risk of marijuana compared to alcohol for most people. And then combining it with you as young people saying, I am going to own the issue of what it means to be a responsible drug user. I am going to own that. I am going to make my best effort not to be a disgusting, gross, binging drug user. I'm going to make my best effort when one of my friends does something stupid and does overdose or land up in a situation to make sure I take care of them and that they wake up and they're fine and they're good. It's going to mean getting behind the Good Samaritan laws so that there's a commitment on the part of university police or on the part of local police that they will not arrest people when an overdose, whether of alcohol or illegal drugs, happens. Right? It means making that unified commitment that what we're about is not just getting rid of government involvement in this stuff, which some of those of us who are libertarians would say, but it also means asserting the responsible approach to how we deal with drugs in our society. Because what's been missing for decades now has been the notion that there is a responsible way to deal with drugs in our society. That there is a responsible perspective which accepts the fact and the reality that there has never been a drug-free society, except maybe the Eskimos because they couldn't grow anything. But by and large, there's never been a drug-free society. There's never going to be a drug-free society. That we have to accept the reality that drugs are here to stay, that they're always going to be here, that there's going to be more and more and more drugs coming up, that we have no idea. I have no idea how many of you are on Ritalin, were or are, and how many of your parents are on antidepressants, and how many of your grandparents are taking Viagra. And we have no idea what concoctions are going to be made out of all three of those drugs for you as you grow older. Right? We are moving into a world of more and more diverse pharmacology and all sorts of psychoactive substances. We are not becoming a less drugged world, right? And in that world, ultimately, the question is going to be, what is the responsible approach? And there's something kind of special about people who are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, lecturing, talking, reasoning, articulating, that what they stand for is the responsible approach. Because when you have an older generation and a generation in power that has been committed to the irresponsible approach, to the knee-jerk reliance on incarceration, to the repudiation of science and to health, to the willingness to allow hundreds of millions of people to be locked up for long periods of time and hundreds of people to die necessarily, then what you are ultimately about is the responsible approach to dealing with drugs in our society. And what that responsible approach consists of is incarceration needs to be minimized as much as possible. To the extent that anything can be made legal or legally regulated, that is what we're going to do. And then if we're going to stand for a core principle, that we're going to put a new principle out into American society and American politics, it's the core principle that nobody but nobody deserves to be punished for what they put in their body absent harm to others. That nobody but nobody deserves to be punished for what you put into your body if you do not hurt anybody else, if you do not get behind the wheel of a car. That you, that I, we are sovereign over our own minds and our own bodies. That we are sovereign. This is not the government, it's not our employers, it's not our parents. This is ours. We are responsible for it. We have an obligation to our fellow citizens, an obligation to ourselves, and an obligation to our parents to produce them healthy grandchildren, right? We have an obligation of that sort. And that sort is fully consistent with the most responsible, the most effective drug policy that one can have in this country. I hope that's what you're committed to. I hope that all of you are going to go on in life to become not just SSDP alumni, but Drug Policy Alliance members. I hope most of you are going to make it to New Mexico in a few months from now. I hope all of you are going to remember that this is something you care about and cared about, and as it goes up and down in the media, that you're going to know this is a pivotal issue for the future of the country, for the future of the world, and for the children who one day will have. Thank you.
Couple weeks ago, Obama was answering questions that was through the internet, and one of them was about the legalization of marijuana, and I think he kind of chuckled at the question.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, my view on that was, there was this internet town hall, and the number one question, because of I think organizing by reform groups, was do you think that legalizing marijuana would be give a boost to the economy? Now, I think the first problem was that the question was worded poorly. That it could have been worded in a way which would have increased the likelihood that Obama would have decreased the likelihood that he used it as a joke line and increased the likelihood he took it on seriously. But I also think that if he had said anything interesting, it would have been a national headline. Obama, President open to legalizing marijuana.
But Ethan, it was a national headline, and it was an embarrassment for him because he made a joke out of it.
I disagree, Tom. I think it was not a national headline. I think that our world sort of was aware of it. I think he laughed at it, the audience laughed at it. It did not become a big thing, and most people, I think, laughed along with him at that point. And I think that the minority of us who care about that issue, did not see it that way. I think the headline, if he had said something otherwise, I think it's an idea that should be considered. If he had just said those words, that would have been a big headline. It would have made the coverage of this issue look petty and just puny compared to what would have happened if he had said that. And I think at this point, he's not ready for all sorts of reasons to kind of stir that up. The push that we're putting on right now, and this is the message I'm trying to get into the people in the White House and to Holder and others, is that with Obama, Webb has already spoken to Obama twice about the commission and to Holder. And Webb is out there saying all options on the table. What we need the White House to do is that when they're asked about the Webb Commission, and when Obama gets asked the same question that Webb's been asked, his answer needs to be, I believe that all options should be on the table. Because all options on the table is the new safe way of saying, yes, there needs to be that thing there. I think it's as far as he can go. This is an issue on which presidents in the White House are not going to lead. Right? It's going to have to get to be 55, 60. But look at medical marijuana, they're not even leading, you got 70%, right? So there has to be a bigger shift. But what we need to ensure is that the first time Obama or Holder gets asked this, their answer is like Webb's answer. And that'll be the real opening. Yes?
What effect do you think the new administration is going to have on the ONDCP media campaign and drug education in general?
If you could hear the question, what's the administration going to do with the Drug Czar Office media campaign? That's been a major focus of DPA's lobbying efforts. It's one of the few areas where we actually got some traction, was in cutting that campaign. There's so much evidence that it doesn't work that I think will make more traction, but I'm not sure, because sometimes that becomes easy throwaway money to say we're doing something. I think the notion that the evidence that it may be held to real criteria, given Obama's talking about science over politics, means it'll be held to stricter criteria. I also think that we'll have a little more access and a little more opportunity to start weaving some harm reduction messages into the drug education stuff. So I think it's going to evolve, but what you never know is if some congressman decides he's going to kick the funding up, nobody wants to oppose it, it's easy, and they do it. Right?
In our criminal justice class, we were talking about how, though Obama is our first black president, we have to see that he's the president first and black second. So that's why we see that he's not really going for drug reform that much. So we were thinking that, what if a way for him to push this issue a little bit more, because it's covering economic crisis, is to understand that our drug laws are so harsh that we have about so many prisoners that I think every 1 out of 4 prisoners in the world is an American. Yeah. And that a way, in fact, to kind of take away a little bit of the expenditure on taxpayers' account would be to do some drug law reform in order to
my sense is that, from what the sense I'm getting is that the administration is going to come out with some sort of statement this summer. And my guess is they're not going to frame it as drug reform, they're going to frame it as sentencing reform and a less harsh prison system. I think the big shift that's going on now is after 20 years of defining the problem as drugs and crime, that increasingly the problem of over-incarceration is emerging. Now, what I hope is that there'll be a moment where at least Holder and maybe Obama comes out and says having less than 5% of the world's population, but about 25% of the world's incarcerated population, is a national shame. You know, and that needs to change.